Ready. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. We're up to the Mishnah and Ayin Chesam and Aleph. If a person sells a donkey, he has not sold the various utensils that come with the donkey. We'll see in the Mishnah, this is only referring to the utensils that are a burden for the donkey, but the utensils that are the riding utensils, so that everyone understands is in fact sold. Nachum Amadi Omer Machar Caleb, but Nachum Amadi says that the utensils are in fact sold, and what he means by that is that even the utensils that relate to carrying a burden are sold as well. Rabbi Yehuda says sometimes these additional utensils are sold and sometimes they're not sold. Thank you very much. Ketzad, let's say that the donkey was in front of the seller and the purchaser. The Caleb Olav and the utensils, all the utensils were on the donkey. And the purchaser said to the seller, "Sell me this donkey." He didn't have to say this donkey. There was no other donkey there. So he meant, sell me everything that comes along with this donkey. Array Caleb Mechuvin. So then all of the utensils will get sold. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Chamor Kahu. But if he asks the question, he says, "Is this your donkey?" Meaning that if it's your donkey, I'll take the donkey. But he's not necessarily indicating that he's going to be buying the various other utensils on the donkey. And Caleb Mechurin, so then the utensils are not sold in such a case, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so Amar Ula in the Gemara, Machlokes Besak V'Diskia V'Kumni. So as we said, the Machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda relates to the sack. That's a sack, is a sack. Diskia, that's like also a sack. It's like a double sack, a fancy sack in which to carry even more provisions. The kumni is a type of saddle seat for a woman that, since the women are not as accustomed to riding a donkey, so it is more of a burden for the donkey to have to bear a woman with her saddle seat. So that's also considered to be carrying a burden. The Tanakama Sava Stam Komolir Kovkai. Tanakama is of the opinion that a donkey, in addition to being designated for riding, is also designated for carrying burdens. But I'm sorry, the Tanakama holds that Stam Komolir Kovkai, that a donkey is set aside really just for riding, and that's the reason why these other utensils would not be sold. Nachum Amadi Sava Stam Komolir. And so the Nachum Amadi is of the opinion that not only is a donkey set aside for riding, but it's also set aside for carrying a burden, and therefore the sack and the double sack and the woman's saddle seat would be sold as well. But the saddle itself, that's the ukaf, or the saddle pad, that's the mardas, or the kilkali, that's the saddle strap, or the chevik, which is the breast strap of the harness. So Divyakol, because these are all riding utensils, and everybody would agree that these are definitely sold. So we have a kasha on this distinction, which is rendered by Ula. It's chamor v'kelev animocher lach. Brisa says that if the seller says, "I'm selling to you the donkey and its utensils," hareza machar esa ukaf esa merdas esa kilkali esa chevik. So then he has sold the riding utensils. But then he has not sold the utensils, the burden carrying burden utensils. And if he says that I'm selling you the donkey and everything which is on the donkey, so then all of these items are sold. So Taima, the implication of this price seems to be how can it be, according to Ula, that everybody's in agreement that the ukaf and merdas, that the riding utensils are automatically sold? According to this brisa, the ukaf and merdas, in order to be sold, is only when the seller explicitly says, "Chamor v'kelev animo kelach." So there seems to be an opinion. This would presumably be the opinion of the Chachamim, that even the riding utensils don't get sold unless they are specified, unless the person says, "I'm also selling the kelim." So the time of Damle Chamor v'kelev hu dekani ukaf merdas halo amolei haki. low. But if it wouldn't have been specified, so then it would not be. Then even these utensils, the writing utensils, would not be sold either. So the Gemara says, nah, that's not true. That even if the seller didn't say, I'm selling the donkey and the utensils, of course, the writing utensils are sold automatically as well. Hakamashman, the Kiddush of this price is as follows. The Apogat, the Amalei, Chamor Caleb, that even though the seller even went so far as to specify that he's selling the utensils. Normally, when he says I'm selling the donkey, he just says I'm selling the donkey. In this case, he said I'm selling the donkey and the utensils. Nonetheless, according to the shita of the Tana of the Brisa, who presumably is the same shita as the Chachamim of our Mishnah, sak v'diskia v'chumni lo kani. The carrying burning utensils would not be sold. So we said the carrying burning utensils are the sak and the diskia, the sack and the double sack, and we mentioned something known as kumni. So I translated kumni, but that's only because I had already read ahead in the Gemara. So my kumni, so the Gemara asked, what is kumni? So Amar Papa Bar Shmuel Merkavta Dinoshi. That's the women's saddle seat. A women's saddle seat is not a natural thing for a donkey to carry, because the women are not as good at riding a donkey, so therefore it's considered like carrying a burden for the donkey. So it's not automatically sold. So Ibaylahu. So now my question is raised by the Gemara. The question is never really resolved by the Gemara. It doesn't seem like this question is resolved by the Gemara. So the question is, Ba'odan Allah Machlokis, the Machlokis between the Tanakama and Nachum Amadi, are they talking about when these additional utensils, the sak and the diskia and the kumni, when they're on top of the donkey, and even then they're arguing about whether it's sold or not? But if it's not on top of the donkey, then Nachum Amadi would agree with the Chachamim that they are not in fact sold. Do we care so much about whether Nachum Amadi agrees or not? We'll pass like the Chachamim. We're not going to pass like Nachum Amadi. So Tosfos points out, you could have asked the question, as the machlokes, both when the utensils are on the donkey and even when the utensils are not on the donkey. It's just another way of expressing that. O Dilma, or maybe b'she'ein alav machlokes. Maybe the machlokes is when these additional utensils are not on top of the donkey. But when these utensils are on top of the donkey, so then the Chachamim, this would be relevant halakha l'maaseh for us, that the Chachamim would agree if at the time the donkey is sold, that these carrying utensils, these burning utensils, the sack, the double sack, and so forth, are already on top of the donkey. The Chachamim would agree with Nachum that they are sold. At the end of the day, we're going to Paskin in Shulchan Aruch, the first day, that Ba'odan Allah Machlokis, that even when these utensils are on top of the donkey, there's a Machlokis. Therefore, or at least that's the case where the Chachamim would say, even in that case, they are not sold. So then the question is, let's say that they're not on top of the donkey. So do the Chachamim go so far as to say that in that case, even if, let's say, the riding utensils, the saddle and the saddle pad were not on top of the donkey, so the Chachamim would agree with Nachum Amadi. That the Chachamim would go so far in that case and say that even, not that they would agree, they would go further in their shita and say that even those utensils wouldn't be sold either. So that's what the Rashbam assumes. But Tosfos says that's not true. He says that's taksisei havu. Those are the standard accoutrements that go together with the donkey. And he says that for sure, even if those were not on top of the donkey, when the donkey was sold, those would of course be sold. But here we're saying that according to the Chachamim, even if the other utensils are on top of the donkey, they're not considered to be sold. According to the first shita over here, the first possibility of the Odan Allah. So Tashma. So we're going to bring various proof texts. The proof texts seem to indicate that the Machlokes is even Ba'odan Allah, even when they're on the donkey, if they're not specified and they're only the burning utensils, that they would not in fact be sold. Because it says explicitly that in the event this is a brisa that says that if the seller said, "I'm selling to you the donkey and everything that's on it," so everything gets sold. So iamis bishlama ba'odan alav machlokes. If the machlokes between them is when the utensils are on the donkey, amani rabbanani. So we know that this is going on. This is the sheet of the Chachamim, because they're explicitly saying only if they say B'chol Masha Olav. If they didn't say B'chol Masha Olav, even though these utensils are Olav, are on the donkey, they wouldn't be sold. But if you say that when the utensils, the carrying utensils are on the donkey, everybody agrees they're sold. So which shita is it that says that it's necessary for the seller to say B'chol Masha Olav? And by the way, I'm also selling everything that's on the donkey. Of course, they're sold. How money? We don't have a shita that's that machmir. So we say, no, it's not a proof. The truth of the matter is, it's a pretty good proof. That's why probably the Rambam paskins that the machlokes is even when it's be'odin alav. But nonetheless, the Gemara rejects it and says, no, the olam she'ein be'odin alav machlokes, that the machlokes really is only when these burning utensils are not on the donkey. For a barani, and this brisa is going like the Chachamim be'ema, and you have to just tweak the language a little bit. That the utensils are not on the donkey. That's the reason the burning utensils are not being sold. And when is it that they're still going to be sold, even though they're not on top? That is when the Chachamim say we're talking about where the machlokes is. You could say only when they're not on top. And the Chachamim are saying that we would sell, that if they would still be considered to be sold, if the seller said, I'm selling to you everything which is eligible to be on top of the donkey. But in fact, if it was already on top of the donkey to begin with, it would automatically be sold, according to that day. Tashmas, I'm going to try to bring another proof. So here's another proof that the machlokes must be be'odan olav, that the Chachamim hold that the carrying utensils, the burning utensils, are still not sold, even when they're on top, of the donkey, unless they're specified to be sold. Because Rabbi Yehuda, who was the last Tana in the Mishnah, said, Omer, he said sometimes the burning utensils will be sold and sometimes not, and he clearly is talking about when they're already on top of the donkey, because he says that the case is where the person says, sell me, chamor chazeh, this donkey. So then the understanding is the kelev ha'mechurin, the utensils are sold because he's saying, sell me this donkey and everything which is on top of the donkey. So my love, so it's very clear that he's talking about when the utensils are already on top of the donkey. So my love, so isn't it clear that Rabbi Yehuda is just sort of continuing along the lines of what the Tanakama and Nocham Amadi were talking about? So when he says that when you to specify this donkey, it means everything on top of the donkey is sold as well. It must be that they're also arguing even in a case where everything is already on top of the donkey. So we say, no, that's not necessarily a proof. Rabbi Yehuda milsa acharisi kamer. Rabbi Yehuda is allowed to speak about his own case scenario. We're turning the page. Namely, he could be talking about when the utensils are on top of the donkey, but the first two Tanoim could very well have been talking about when the utensils were not on top of the donkey. So Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina tries to settle this dispute once and for all. Are we talking even in a case of the Odin Olav that the Chachamim would be of the opinion that the burning utensils would not be sold? Tashma, we said in the previous Mishnah, if you sell the wagon, you have not sold the mules. And we said yesterday, Rav Tzachliva Bar Ma'ava had a tradition from the Tanoim that he recited in the presence of Rabbi Yabo. He said, wait a second, my tradition says, if you sell the wagon, you have sold the wool, so the mules. And Rabbi Yabo said to him, that's not what our Mishnah says. Our Mishnah, our tradition says, if you sold the wagon, you have not sold the mules. And Rav Tzachliva Bar Ma'ava asked his Rebbe, Ismaya, should I delete it? Should I erase this teaching that I was taught? And Rabbi Yabo had said, as you may recall, good chazara, your particular Mishnah, your Tanaic teaching that you received is when they're attached to each other. When they're attached to each other, of course, the mules are sold as well. However, that means that the Mishnah that we had right before this Mishnah was talking about when they were unattached. So it was talking about when the wagon and the mules were not attached to each other. And since the previous Mishnah, was talking about where they were not attached, Seifa Nami, so the Seifa, our case as well, where the person is selling the donkey, must be talking about where the utensils are not on top of the donkey as well. So Adarabba, so the Mishnah says, so the Gemara says, that's not a good proof. Because Maresha, the previous Mishnah, was clearly talking about when everything was on top. But lo malka, in the case of the very first Mishnah of our parak, we said does not sell the slaves that go together with the boat unless it's specified. But lo malka lo asavadim lo asantiki, and or the merchandise is not sold either. But aminan my antiki, and we said, what does it mean that you don't sell the antiki? What are the antiki? So Amarav Papa Iska the Begaba. It's talking about the antiques, right? It's talking about the merchandise which is inside of the matzufin, inside of the bags. And all of these things are clearly on top of the boat, because otherwise, clearly, they would have no relationship to the sale of the boat. Any particular part of a piece of merchandise doesn't necessarily relate to a particular boat. And since we can say, and since the very first Mishnah is talking about when they are connected, they are on top of each other. Stefanami, we could say that this case also is be'oden olav when they're on top of each other. Ella, we see that the Mishnayos are not consistent in this regard. The first Mishnah, it's on top, and the second Mishnah, they're not connected. Elatana mili kitani, they're not necessarily consistent with each other, and each one is its own case scenario. So we can't prove from the previous Mishnayos whether the burning utensils in this case were on top of the donkey or not on top of the donkey. So the Meiser, if somebody would sell their donkey and the burning utensils will be on top, we would say he does not get to keep the burning utensils. This does not get transmitted because it's a bayad lo ifshita. That's how it's generally assumed by most of the Forshei HaShulchan Aruch. It's a bayad lo ifshita. So if it already went into the purchaser's possession, he's the muksak, and the seller wouldn't be allowed to take it away. It's mashma from the Rambam that it is a bayad ifshita, that the machlokes is for sure, even in a case of, or exclusively in a case of, ba'odan olav, when the utensils are on top of the donkey. Even then, the Chachamim say that the burning utensils do not get sold. So according to the Rambam, it would seem even if the purchaser had already taken them, the seller would be allowed to yank them back. Stimin Zagam Nasan, Amar Abaye, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Nasan, V'Sumchos, V'Nachum, Amadi, Kul, Spiru. All of these different Tanaim are of the opinion in their own different way, in their own case scenarios. One would not necessarily agree with the other, but each one in their own cases, for their own reasons, agree that Kimazin Inish Midi Ivachot Tashmishe Mazin. That when a person sells a particular item, they sell all of the different accoutrements that come together with that item. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer Amoker is based upon Moker Sakora. We see it from Rabbi Eliezer because he said if you sell an olive press, you also sell the beam that comes together with the olive press that helps to serve the olive press. Indeed, it is the previous parak. Very good. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, we see it also from the previous parak. Because the Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Omer, if you sell the entire city, you have sold the center. Because if you only sell the left guard, it's not gonna be good enough for the team in the city, right? You got to sell the center as well. So according to one opinion, the center we know is a person, but it's not necessarily the center of the basketball team, but it's the surveyor of the city, or it's the sentry of the city. And the other opinion of the Gemara was that it's the surrounding fields of the city. Rabbi Meir, also seems to hold this way, because Rabbi Meir said, also previous parak, Rabbi Meir Omer, Machar es hakerem, if you sell the vineyard, Machar tashmishi hakerem, you sell all of the utensils that are needed in order, and all of the items that are needed in order to be able to tend to a vineyard properly. Rabbi Nassim Mesumkos held this way in the case where you sell a boat, because they held that if you sell a boat, you sell the little rowboats that go together with it, and they just disagreed, right, the dinghy, and they just disagreed about the terminology. One called it a beitzis, Rabbi Nassim called it a beitzis, and Sumkos called it a dugis. Beitzis for dugis, Nacham Amadi, and Nacham Amadi, Hadamam Nacham Amadi is our Mishnah, says that when you sell the donkey, you also pin the carrying utensils on top of the donkey as well. That also gets sold. Rabbi Yehuda says that it depends whether these carrying utensils are the burning utensils on the donkey are sold or not. Depends on the circumstances, and he clearly understands that the scenario is that the donkey is already carrying the utensils. And he says if the purchaser says chamor chazu, this donkey, he meant this donkey and everything that's on it. Why is it if he says this donkey, he means everything on top of the donkey, and if he says chamor who, and if he says, is this your donkey? He only gets the donkey. So Amarava chamor chazu, when he says that this donkey, he knows already there's only one donkey around. He didn't ask if the donkey belongs to the seller, so he knows the donkey belongs to the seller. So when he's specifying this donkey, he means I want everything that comes with this donkey as is. with all of the appliances that are on top of the donkey. The reason he said this donkey is because he meant everything that comes together with this donkey, all of the utensils, not only the riding utensils, which presumably, like Tosa says, could be sold even if they weren't on top, but even the burning utensils. If he says, is it your donkey? He's saying that because he says, hey, if it's your donkey, then how much is this donkey in the window? I'll buy it. He means he's asking, is it your donkey? And that's all that he wants is the donkey. Is it your donkey? If it is, then I would be happy to buy the donkey, but that's it, just the donkey, and that does not imply anything on top of the donkey, so he would not be buying the burning utensils. Next Mishnah. If you sell the donkey, you also have sold, interestingly enough, the foal of the donkey. The donkey has a child. The child of the donkey is called a sayach, it's called a foal. That comes together with the donkey. But if a person sells a cow, he does not sell the veal. He does not sell the little calf that comes together with the cow. If a person sells the garbage can, he sells the garbage inside the garbage can. Added bonus. If you buy a well, so then the water inside of the bore has been sold as well. We'll see, the Gemara will say this is a shitas yachid. If it's a shitas yachid, does it mean that we don't paskin that way? So the Mechaber says, the Ramah says we paskin that way anyway, because this opinion is recorded in the Mishnah. Macha kaveris, macha devorim. If you sell a beehive, you have also sold the bees. Macha shovach. If you've sold a dove coat, Macha yonim, so then you've sold, me and all my friends, you've sold the yonim, the doves inside of the dove coat. Gemara says, Hechi dami, Ida Amalei. What's the case over here? Why are we distinguishing between the child of a donkey and the child of a cow? Shouldn't it be the same din either way? Ida Amalei Uvana. If the seller said, I'm selling the animal and its child, so afilu paru v'narnami, so then the cow should also get sold together with the child. All the cows should come home. If he didn't say this animal and the child, afilu chamar nami lo, so then even the case of the donkey, the child should not be sold. So why do we distinguish between the donkey and the cow in the Mishnah? So Amar Papa. There's no rationale. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. It's a valid suggestion, but the Gemara gives a different answer. So Amar Papa. So Papa says in response to Alan's question, the Amalei, we're talking about Chamor Meniko Paramenika Ani Mochelach. That the case was where the seller said, I'm selling to you a nursing donkey, I'm selling to you a nursing cow. Now, a cow, if you say a nursing cow, you mean, yeah, this cow is going to be able to expel milk, but you don't necessarily mean that, oh, and I'm going to give you the child that's being nursed because it's valuable to have a cow that you're able to extract milk from anyway, independent of a child. But when you say a donkey that's milking, it's nursing, what do I care that the donkey is nursing? I'm not interested in donkey milk, okay? Donkey milk does not have any real value in its own right. So when you're saying chama minika, a nursing donkey, you mean I'm selling the donkey together with the child that the donkey is nursing. So I could say that it's important that it be a nursing cow, not from the standpoint of the calf of the cow, but from the standpoint that it's a cow that the purchaser wants to use to expel milk. But for a donkey, why mention that the donkey is nursing? It means that a nursing donkey that comes together with the child that it's nursing. And why is it called a siyach? Why is that the word that's used for a foal for a young donkey child? Why is it called a siyach? So it's a very interesting thing because the way in which the child is brought around by its mother, that it likes to hear sweet words. And whenever you use the sweet words, even for a person that owns such a donkey, if it's a young donkey, so it follows like a sweet melody, a sweet tune, or you whistle, and it comes when it gets older, so then it becomes much more difficult to handle. So Amar Shmuel bar Nachman, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, while we're on the subject of siyach and sweet words, it's not always such a good idea to go after sweet words. Going after sweet words sometimes has the connotation of going after your temptations, that they were like sweet words. Somebody says, oh, come, you want to watch the football game? Come, let's go out to the bar. Sweet words. We'll have a drink together. So it's not always so good to follow the sweet words. What does it mean when the Torah says in Parshas Kukas that the Moshlim say, Bo Cheshbon, that we're going to come to the city of Cheshbon? The city of Cheshbon, so if they were talking, presumably Bilam and his friends, the other soothsayers, were talking about the war in which Sichon Melech Heshbon defeated Moab, right? But the word Cheshbon also has the connotation of let's make a calculation. So Bo v'nechshav Cheshbono shaloyim. It means that we're all bidden to make calculations in our lives. Rabbi Eliezer Meir Horowitz, in his commentary in the back of the Gemara, has a very interesting insight. He quotes a Yalkut, he quotes a Medrash, says that there was a tradition that this war, I guess, between Sichon and Moab took place during the month of Elul. And therefore that's why Chazal felt that it was appropriate that when they said these words, Bo Cheshbon Tiponev Sikonen Er Sichon, that the city of Cheshbon shall be built and prepared, they really did have some sort of a Ruach HaKodesh, perhaps on some level, that they were talking about the month of Elul and the type of Cheshbonos calculations we're supposed to make during the Tshuva season. So this is the Yana Diyoma. So what is this? Let's make a calculation about sins and mitzvos. Hefsin mitzvah keneged schara. That if you're going to lose out on doing a mitzvah, so you should think about what would be the schar that you would get if you would do the mitzvah, schar avera. And if you're planning to do an avera, you're planning to do some sort of transgression because your Yetzer Hara is getting the better of you. So think about the long-term effects of that transgression, of how you could suffer in the long term. Keneged efseda. Tipanev sikonein, and then you'll be able to build and prepare properly. Matas osekain. If you engage in these cheshbonos, particularly during Chodesh Elul, the way that Rabbi Eliezer Meir Horowitz understands, tipaneh ba'olam hazeh, you're going to be able to build for yourself a nice life and good judgment in this world, and you'll also prepare a good place for yourself in heaven, the Olam Haba. Ir Sichon, and then the reference was city of Sichon. In Mesim Adam Atzmo, so we're going to take the word Ir and we're going to change it around to Ayar, which is a foal, like the foal that we're discussing now in Mishnah, a young donkey. If you make yourself like a young donkey, Shemahalik Achar, this is another word. We have Sayach, and Ayar is another word for that. Shemahalik Achar Sichanar, that you follow sweet words. So following sweet words in terms of following your Yetzer Hara temptations, not a good thing. Maksi Bacharov, what does the next pasuk say? Next pasuk says, Ki Eish Yatzami Cheshbon. A fire went out from Cheshbon. It was talking originally about the war between Cheshbon and Moab, but here it means that a fire is going to take out. Teitzei Eish Mimachashbin, that there's going to be a fire that goes out from those who really, the tzaddikim, who do think through their actions. So we said earlier that in the Olam Haba, everybody's going to have like their own special place, their own special chuppah, and each person is going to get singed and burned by the chuppah of his fellow that's on a higher level than his own. So the tzaddikim will have a high level chuppah, have a high place in heaven. So a fire will go out from where their place in heaven, but tochel, and it will consume those who did not calculate properly and they committed averos rather than taking advantage of mitzvos. Pasuk goes on to say a flame will go out from the city of Sichon. So Mikiryas Sichon also sounds like Sichin. Mikiryas Tzadikim, it's going to go out from the city, from the place where the Tzadikim will reside, the Olam Haba, with the Tzadikim are called Shenikru Sichin. They're called Sichin. Sichin means basically like little like trees. So like young sapling trees, and they're compared to trees. Tzadik katama yifrach, and ein hatadasim la tzadikim yomenes hadasa elab is tamar. Different psukim that the Rashbam quotes that where tzadikim are compared to trees. Achla Ar Moab, that the province of Ar is going to, in Moab, is going to be consumed. That's what the Pashup shot of the words say. What does it mean from an agadic homiletic perspective? Here too, we're using the word ayar to connote ayar, a foal. Once again, the foal. So this is a person will be consumed chas v'shalom if they follow the Yetzer Hara, they follow the evil inclination, the bad inclination. Ayar zeh, like this ayar that we're using the word ar to connote ayar, a young foal, shemahalik achar sichanar, who just follows sweet blandishments, and it does not consider the effect of the actions of following the sweet talk to commit transgressions. Baalei Bamos Arnon, this was referring to the lords of the heights of Arnon. Elu Gasei Aruach, these are the haughty people who are on great heights, right? Because of their haughtiness. The Amamar, as we learn, Kol Adam Sheyesh Bo Gases Aruach Nofel Begehinim, that anybody who has haughtiness, they end up in Gehinnom. Baniram, and then we have the pasuk of Baniram, which is talking about the sovereignty over Cheshbon was lost. Baniram avad Cheshbon. Iram is a lotion of sovereignty. Cheshbon lost its sovereignty. What is the word Baniram connote from a homiletic perspective? Amarasha Ein Ram. It's referring to these Rishaim. The Rishaim say Ein Ram. There's Elais Din, Elais Dayan. That there is nobody up above. They feel that there's no accountability for their actions. Avad Cheshbon. So they're going to lose out because they did not calculate properly the effect of their actions. Avad Cheshbono Shalaylam ad Divon. And then we say it was removed until Divon, right? Baniram avad Cheshbon ad Divon. That the sovereignty of Cheshbon was lost. Okay, up until Divon. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hamtein here, Divon has a lashon of din. Hamtein ad sheyavo din, that the din, the judgment day, is going to arrive for these people who deny the existence of their creator. Banashima Nofach, and they will be removed up until Nofach, which reaches ad Meidba, which reaches until Meidba. So what is that connote when it says Banashima Nofach asher ad Meidba? Ad shetavo eish. She'enat tzricha, up until the she'enat tzricha nipuach, until a fire that does not need to be blown at all, because it just is going to consume on its own. Ad Meidva is going to continue to rage ad shetadiv nishmasan, until the souls of the wicked shall suffer. Amilah ad da'avid my deboy. But some say until, this is the pshat of the Rashbam. Rashbam says until HaKadosh Baruch Hu does whatever he needs to do in order to exterminate them and to punish them in the world to come. And some say, I think the Rashash says, Ad Avin my Dubai, that the people who want to sin, so if they're going to go in that direction, Habalatame Poksidlo, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will allow them to do whatever they want, but then they're going to have to pay the price for it afterwards. We'll just continue to the end of the Agadah. Anybody who separates himself from the Torah, he's going to be one on the subject of a fire consuming people. We'll bring another medrash along the same lines. Eishol Chalto will be consumed by a fire. Shnei Amar, pasuk in Yechezkel. V'nasatias panai b'hem. I'm going to turn my face towards such people. Mi'a'ish yatzu v'eish tochlem. The fire is going to go out. That's the fire of Torah. Isha das alamo, because they didn't keep the fire, the Torah properly. The Eish tochlem, and their failure to keep the Torah properly is going to consume them. Somebody who separates himself from Torah falls in Gehinnom. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, the Mishlei. Adam toem miderach haskel, a person strays from the straight, proper, thoughtful path. The kavish shoim yanuach. He's going to end up in the congregation of Rephaim. What is Rephaim referring to? The Ein Rephaim el Gehinnom. Rephaim is a reference to the fires of Gehinnom Shneimar, as the pasuk says in Mishlei. Also, different parak in Mishlei. Below Yada ki Rephaim Sham. It wasn't known that Rephaim are there. The Imke Shaul Kruel. That those who are destined for the depths of Gehinnom, of Sheol, the nethermost pit of the world to come, that is a place of Rephaim. So we see that a person who strays from Torah, from the Derech Haskel, will end up in Kal Rephaim, will end up in a place of Rephaim, which is the same as Gehinnom. So therefore, better not to stray from Torah and to make a cheshbon with respect to all of your actions. Stop here. Okay.